Hello and welcome to the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. Now before I get into the review proper, I have one short announcement regarding my involvement this Friday night at Final Battle. That's Ring of Honor's last pay-per-view of the year. Like I said, it's happening this Friday at the UMBC Event Center in Baltimore, Maryland. It's going to be on pay-per-view and on Honor Club. The show has been expanded to 4 hours, and hour 1 of the show is called Final Battle Hour 1. Naturally, that first hour of the show will be absolutely free to watch on Facebook Live, on YouTube, on Twitch, I believe, and of course on Honor Club. I'll be part of hour 1 doing some ringside interviewing between the matches. I will be on the air interviewing some of the stars of Ring of Honor as they prepare for their matches later in the night for Final Battle. I'm really excited for the opportunity, and I'll also be involved in the TV tapings of the Philadelphia event 2 nights later at the old ECW Arena. I'll actually be sitting ringside doing commentary for one of the TV matches alongside Ian Riccaboni and Caprice Coleman, and once I heard what match I'll be doing commentary for, I got very excited because these guys are all right up my alley. I can't wait to be calling that match. I can't wait for the whole weekend experience. Baltimore, Philadelphia, Final Battle, and Final Battle Fallout happening Friday and Sunday. I can't wait for it. I hope you get a chance to watch it as well, especially hour 1, which is, once again, it's free to watch, and I'll be part of that show as well, so please check that out. It's going to be a lot of fun. And now, on to the Raw review. It's the final Raw before TLC. The U.S. title's on the line, and a marriage comes to an end, as Vic Joseph so boisterously said to start the show. Jerry Lawler's presiding over the signing of the divorce papers between Lana and Rusev, which is very fitting. I love just Rusev's whole vibe. This whole thing is just amazing. I love it. He says a big smile on his face, doesn't care anymore, wearing a big Donald Duck t-shirt. It's amazing. Lana is so over the top in her delivery. It almost borders on satire, but it's so great because she's just yelling and screaming at Rusev all the time. And Rusev's just like, he's deflecting. He doesn't really care. He's just kind of shrugging her off. It's really, I think the dynamic between these two in this moment is actually, it's working really well. Rusev tells Lana he wants a match with Bob Lashley in exchange for signing the papers. Sure enough, Lashley shows up and tells Rusev that after this whole divorce thing's over, he's going to marry Lana, and Rusev says, "You can have her, pal." He signs the papers, and then Lashley starts beating him up, but it ends with Rusev suplexing Lashley through the table they signed the papers on. You know, I actually was really entertained by this opening segment. I mean, we've had to wade through a whole lot of bullshit for the last couple of months, seeing these 3 individuals go through some really tacky stuff, some really tacky material here in the build-up to the divorce papers being signed. But man, like, if this is the payoff to it, I'm like, you know what? I wonder if it's worth it. We'll have to wait and see how their tables match at TLC plays out. But, you know, I think, like I said, I love the vibe, the dynamic between Rusev and Lana here. Lashley kind of getting his comeuppance at the end of the segment there with Rusev standing tall, which is kind of a rarity in this storyline so far. It was very entertaining. It's been hard to be entertained by what we've seen so far. But, like I said, we'll have to wait and see how TLC plays out. But I liked how this segment was. Backstage, Kevin Owens being interviewed. He says that AOP are doing Seth Rollins' bidding. He's going to go look for AOP. As he's walking through the hallways, he finds Rey Mysterio, and he's like, "It's dangerous to go alone. Take the steel pipe." First match of the night sees Matt Hardy taking on Drew McIntyre. Gets some big heel heat here by bringing up Matt's children, including his newborn son from this past week. But then he says, you know, he brings up Matt's checkered past, and he says, "I hope that the little Hardy boys don't follow in their dad's footsteps." And the crowd, like, that kind of line, it's so close to home and so like on the nose that the crowd doesn't even give him like the traditional, "Oh, boo, you suck." That's like, damn, that really hit hard. Like, they didn't even think to boo that one. Anyway, it's a pretty short matchup. Hardy has some moments of fire. He actually hits Drew with a twist of fate to open the matchup. But after the commercial break, Drew's in control. Future shot DDT, Claymore kick, and the baddie wins. I'm kind of surprised Samoa Joe wasn't like, "Hell yeah, Drew, you keep bringing up Matt's family," just like I would do. Backstage, some tension between Charlotte and Becky Lynch. Charlotte kind of reluctantly offers Becky to help her out in her handicap match with the Kabuki Warriors tonight, but Becky says she don't need no help, she'll take her chances, and we'll see how this all plays out by the end of the night. Elsewhere, Kevin Owens still looking for AOP. He runs into Mojo Rawley, who we haven't seen in forever at this point. He's no help at offering directions. Kevin slaps him in the face. Would you believe this is going to go somewhere? They first reported on Monday morning, then showed some highlight packages for it on Raw, that Batista and the New World Order, in particular Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and X-Pac, are going to be the first inductees inductees into the 2020 Hall of Fame. I thought it was kind of early for them to be announcing the Hall of Fame inductees, but I guess they want to start the class off with a bang as tickets go on sale. Batista, his body of work speaks for itself. I think he absolutely deserves to go in based on what he did as a single star after breaking off from Evolution. If they incorporate his box office success after wrestling, that'd be kind of cool, because I think that's a big part of his story as well, but we'll see. As far as the NWO, of course, they are an iconic group. They are one of the most influential groups in the history of wrestling. I knew they weren't going to get in until after DX got in, but couldn't they have waited more than like less than a year to do it? Like, it's weird. It's like DX last year, NWO next year, no breathing period between. X-Pac is going to be a two-time Hall of Famer in 2 years. That is a record. The Viking Raiders issue an open challenge, and the Street Profits answer the call. Pretty short but entertaining matchup. Montez Ford's great. At one point, he and Ivar get into a bit of a cartwheel off in the match. Ultimately, the Vikings win with the Viking experience. After the match, in a show of respect, Seth Rollins appears, and he has some business to attend to. The other two teams leave him alone, and Seth says he wants to call it the AOP right then and there, but Kevin Owens shows up instead, and Kevin's got his trusty steel pipe, and he wants to know where AOP are, and sure enough, they just start rolling in to the arena right as they're talking about it. Seth has had it with all the accusations by Kevin that he and AOP are in cahoots, so he leaves. Kevin calls out AOP again, and this time Sami Zayn shows up alongside Mojo Rawley. And when they're right next to each other, it looks like Mojo is Sami's older brother right there. Sami says that he has applied for and received his manager's license, which explains why he is able to go apparently now from show to show. We'll see how that plays out. I'm really curious to see how Sami, the manager, goes. Like, he has different charges on each show. Could be very interesting, but he wants Kevin, I should say, to apologize to Mojo for slapping him earlier, and Mojo gets up in Kevin's grill, and Sam is like, you probably shouldn't use that tone of voice with him when he's got that look in his eyes. I do like they play on the history between Kevin and Sami here. And Mojo says anybody looks tough with a steel pipe in their hand, and Kevin tosses the pipe in the air. Mojo catches it, also catches a stunner as well. Kevin beats him down with the pipe some more, and that's how the segment ends as we go to break. Interesting little deviation, kind of a distraction from the main storyline, the main thread of Kevin, Seth, and AOP's involvement. These guys kind of a nice little side mission for it, basically. A nice excuse to see Mojo Rawley again. It's weird, after all these releases we had this past weekend, and people were kind of saying, what about Mojo Rawley? And sure enough, here's Mojo Rawley to see him get beat up by Kevin Owens. Next match sees Aleister Black taking on Akira Tozawa. They announced during the introductions that Aleister's taking on Buddy Murphy at TLC, and so during the intros we get a little pre-tape promo from Buddy Murphy here, and we'll be seeing the inverse in Buddy's match later in the night. Short match, but it tells a pretty good story. Aleister controls the pace. He catches Akira doing a dive on the outside with a knee, hits the Black Mass in the ring to win the matchup. Then after we go backstage, we see Humberto Carrillo about to be interviewed. Before he can say anything, Zelina Vega shows up, naturally, because Aleister Black just showed up in the previous segment. So anyway, she gets right in his face, then Andrade shows up, and he and Humberto argue in Spanish, and then as they walk off, Zelina basically tells the audience, oh, they're gonna have a match tonight. We get a promo for the Liv Morgan makeover coming soon. I'm hoping it's not Emelina 2.0. Then we get that match with Andrade and Humberto Carrillo. They're implying on commentary that there might be something more to the conflict between these guys than just some competitive spirit, maybe something having to do with Zelina Vega. Anyway, it's a really great match up here. Ultimately, the match ends when Humberto rolls up Andrade after Andrade accidentally collides with Zelina on the apron. So Humberto rolls up Andrade to win, and it's Andrade's first loss on Raw since coming to that show. And I hope it sets up nice things for Humberto in the future. But, you know, again, I talked a couple weeks ago about how the lack of pop that he got for a backstage interview, the reaction he got was no bigger than his debut after 5 or 6 weeks on air, and that we got the same kind of lack of response when he showed up for his interview that preceded this matchup. So hopefully this will be what can help catapult him to something a little more tangible, more fan support, basically. We get a nice promo backstage by Rey Mysterio toward his opponent for the evening, AJ Styles. Then we see Buddy Murphy in action against Zack Ryder, and like I said, you know, the Aleister Black match had a Buddy Murphy promo. This had the inverse. During the introductions, we see an Aleister Black promo. He's still kind of like breathing heavy and sweaty from his last match, saying the biggest mistake Buddy Murphy made was knocking on his door. This is another short match. Murphy wins with the Murphy's Law, and so Buddy and Aleister looking pretty strong going into their match on Sunday. Backstage, Kevin Owens finds AOP's van and starts beating up with the steel pipe. He opens the back door to see a shadowy figure sitting in a chair with his back turned to him, but before he can see who it is, AOP shows up, beats down Kevin Owens. The shadowy figure turns around and reveals it's Seth Rollins. Everything, we already knew who it was going to be, but this reveal just kind of like it sealed the deal. Seth stomps Kevin's head on the concrete and lays him out. Then after the commercial break, Rollins cuts this big, super like explaining all his motivations, heel promo for the live audience, saying, you know, what's it going to take? Nothing's ever good enough for you people. What do I have to do to impress you? I've been beating myself up all year long. I've been never taking a day off. I brought the Universal Championship back to Raw for all of you, but you still boo me and you still call me a liar because Kevin Owens calls me a liar. And so he basically says, you know, I was driven to work with AOP after you guys accused me of doing it. So now it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and here we are. So now we see AOP standing alongside Seth Rollins to close that part out. This was a really good, this whole thing was great. This whole story arc with Seth and the AOP and Kevin Owens, we've seen it build up for the last couple of weeks, and would have been nice to see more red herrings in the build of this, but we are very close to pay-per-view time, so I get why they kind of had it happen here. But man, it was a really cool like reveal to see Seth turn around, oh, he's the baddie this whole time, and he's got to explain his actions here, and he's very justified in his actions because, yeah, Rollins was the guy. He was busting his ass for the fans, and he was very much for the people in all the build-up to WrestleMania and SummerSlam, and the fans still turned on him, and you know, I think he feels very justified. It's one of those like heel turns, like I said a couple weeks ago, where it's like, man, this makes so much sense, and like he believes he's right, which makes the heel turn like this even better. So I'm really a fan of how that went tonight. Becky Lynch hoping to accomplish what Charlotte could not do last week by beating the Kabuki Warriors in a handicap match. It's a pretty good match here. Becky looking very tough in spite of all the obstacles thrown her way. It does end at a DQ when Asuka hits Becky with a chair on the outside, and then this huge spot by Kairi Sane. After that, but beat down with a chair. They put her on a table, insane elbow off the top rope to the outside through the table. That was huge. We get a little backstage chat by the OC. They talk about how Gallows and Anderson will get their Raw tag title match soon enough, and AJ warning Randy Orton to stay out of his business tonight or they might end his career for life, and AJ makes a weird sound. Before we go to the trainers area where Becky Lynch is refusing ice packs, Charlotte comes in, which says, oh, good match. She walks off, down the hallway she goes, maybe 3 or 4 steps out of the trainer's room when the Kabuki Warriors jump Charlotte from behind, beat her up with a chair, and they walk off. Becky Lynch either hears none of what's happening, just mere feet outside of the room she's in, or her pride is just too darn big for her to help out. But we do see a few minutes later, we see Charlotte and Becky kind of like recuperating together in the trainer's room after we see a Kabuki Warriors backstage promo where they challenge Charlotte and Becky to a match for the tag titles. And then, you know, we see that trainer's room thing with Charlotte and Becky, and they say, we'll accept that challenge, but we're going to up the ante in a TLC match. I can't wait for that one. Eric Rowan taking on some local talent who I'm pretty sure they don't even say his name this time. As the match begins, the guy runs out of the ring, grabs the mystery cage, runs up the ramp, and puts it down on the stage. And it's basically this tactic for him to try and win by countout, but it totally backfires. Rowan is snapped and hits a bunch of consecutive iron claws, like yelling at him, "You're trying to hurt something I love or somebody I love." 3 iron claws. The referee calls the match, but Rowan hits one more for good measure. So there we go. We're getting a little more detail as to what might be under the burlap sack. Is somebody he loves apparently is under that burlap. We'll have to see where it all goes. We did get a really weird skit here with the Street Profits. It's called the Monday After Weekend Update, blatant parody of SNL's Weekend Update, and they have all this like laugh track stuff going in with all the jokes. The jokes they're saying, very lame jokes. Probably one of the worst showings by Street Profits here. Is like it's not their element. Like they've done like the whole like Greek chorus thing in the months past where they recap what's been going on, which is basically what they did here. They also they're the first ones to announce that Lashley and Rusev, that match is going to be a tables match. That's the one thing you actually gain from this segment here. Everything else is just like, why are they doing it this way? What's their motivation? Are they trying to get Colin Jost and Michael Che to show up again for next year's WrestleMania? Let's not do that. In your main event, Rey Mysterio defends the U.S. title against AJ Styles, the man he beat for it a couple of weeks ago. It's a solid match here in the main event. At one point near the end, there's a bit of a botch where it looks like they're going for like a Super Styles Clash out of the corner, but they both lose their footing. AJ recovers by hitting a regular type Styles Clash on Rey. And then in comes Randy Orton, who like slides in, gives AJ a nice wink, and then leaves the ring. And that distraction, Rey, whose pants have totally split by this point, he rolls up AJ in a small package and wins the match to retain the championship and right after that, we go off the air. Like, no time to process that. You could tell they were running heavy. The bug is showing in the corner of the screen before the match even ends, which so rarely happens. But it was kind of cool to see that, like, the frenetic energy of like, oh my God, like, is the match going to cut off? Like, is the show going to cut off before the match ends? They held on just long enough for it, and I think that kind of made the ending of the show that much more exciting, kind of down to the wire action there. But yeah, it was a good way to close out the show, continuing the feud with AJ and Orton. Ray wins yet again and retains that U.S. championship, so this reign is like 100 times better than the last time he held the belt. My final grade for this week's Raw is a B. I really enjoyed this week's episode. I think it really made up for last week's not so great show. You know, I think last week the big problem was, like, you know, there was no matches for TLC announced at all, and like then this week, between SmackDown last week and then this week's Raw, all the matches for TLC were announced. They really unkinked the hose and all the matches came out, and that's kind of an interesting, dicey way to try and build for a pay-per-view. But like when you see the matches they did announce, like it all stems from the build we've seen for the last couple of weeks. So it's like it's there, but having the official announcements like sooner, I think, helps kind of sell the pay-per-view a little bit more. Be that as it may, I really enjoyed, like I said, the structure of the show. The longer matches were really good that were interspersed with the shorties as well. The story arcs were so well done this week with Rollins and Kevin Owens and AOP. The bit of a red herring with Sami Zayn and Mojo Rawley getting involved too, but nice to see them getting involved nonetheless. And then the arc with Becky Lynch and Charlotte and the Kabuki Warriors as well. The divorce segment was oddly entertaining to me. I think it was really good. They did a really good job building toward TLC with as little time as they had. The only part I didn't really like was the Weekend Update parody, because it was just so out of character for the Street Profits. I don't think it really fit their vibe at all. But besides that, you know, not a 5-star episode of Raw, but it was definitely, I think, one worth watching. But let me know what you thought about this week's Raw in the comment section below, and be sure to give it a letter grade by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. You will see my TLC predictions later this week. However, the TLC review will come a bit later next week, not in the usual time frame that usually gets put out by me, because of course I will be out of town for Ring of Honor business that weekend, but I will try and watch it as soon as I get back home, and I'll give you my review sometime later in the week. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.